Friends, I need to tell you about the most unbelievable thing that happened to me last month. And when I say unbelievable, I mean the kind of story that makes you question everything you thought you knew about property rights and human nature. You inherit a beautiful piece of land from your grandfather, a quiet, wooded lot that's been in your family for decades. You finally decide to visit it, maybe build a little cabin, plant a garden. You're driving up that dirt road, windows down, feeling grateful for this unexpected gift. But when you arrive, there's already a house there. Not just any house, a fully built cottage, complete with flower boxes and a front porch. And sitting on that porch, calm as you please, is someone you barely know, sipping coffee like he owns the place. That someone? My neighbor. And that land. Legally, completely, 100% mine? What would you do? How would you handle discovering that someone had built their dream home on your property without asking? Without permission, without even bothering to check who actually owned the land? Well, stick around, because this story has more twists than a country road and the ending. Let's just say it taught both of us lessons we'll never forget. Let me take you back to where this all began. My grandfather, God rest his soul, was one of those quiet, thoughtful men who believed in leaving something behind for family. He'd worked construction his whole life, saved every penny he could, and 23 years ago, he bought this beautiful lot on the outskirts of town. Someday, he used to tell me when I was little, this will be yours. Maybe you'll build a little place where you can hear the birds sing and watch the sunset through the pine trees. When Grandpa passed 2 years ago, that lot came to me in his will. But life gets in the way, doesn't it? Work, family obligations, just the daily grind of keeping up with everything. I kept meaning to visit, kept planning to drive out there and see what Grandpa had loved so much about that piece of land. Finally, on a gorgeous Saturday morning in October, you know those perfect fall days when the air is crisp and the leaves are just starting to turn, I decided today was the day. I packed a thermos of coffee, grabbed the old survey maps Grandpa had kept in his filing cabinet, and headed out to my land. The drive was exactly what I'd hoped for. Winding country roads, trees arching overhead, that peaceful feeling you get when you leave the noise of town behind. I was already imagining where I might put a small cabin, maybe a vegetable garden. Somewhere to escape and remember Grandpa. I turned down the gravel road that led to my lot. Following the landmarks Grandpa had described, the big oak with the lightning scar, the stone fence that marked the beginning of the property line, my heart was full of anticipation and sweet memories. And then I saw it. At first, I thought I'd taken a wrong turn. There, sitting right in the middle of what should have been my empty, peaceful lot, was a cottage. Not some ramshackle shed or temporary structure. I'm talking about a real house. Painted siding, a wraparound porch with carved railings, window boxes bursting with autumn mums, even a little picket fence around a flower garden. My first thought was confusion. Had I misunderstood the inheritance? Had there been some mistake with the will? But then I saw him. My neighbor and I used that term loosely because we'd maybe waved to each other 3 times over the years. Sitting in a rocking chair on what he apparently considered his front porch, reading the morning paper and enjoying a cup of coffee like he didn't have a care in the world, I sat in my car for a full minute, just staring. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. This man, let's call him Bob, had built an entire house on my grandfather's land. On my land, I took a deep breath, grabbed the deed from my glove compartment, and walked toward the cottage. My legs felt shaky, but I was determined to stay calm. Natural dialogue with emotional undertones, Bob looked up as I approached, and for a second, he had the decency to look surprised. "Oh, hey there," he called out way too cheerfully for someone who was trespassing. "I don't understand," he said finally, but his voice had lost all that confidence from the day before. I thought, nobody had been here in years, ... single quotes. My grandfather bought this land in 2001. He paid taxes on it every year until he died. I've been paying taxes on it for the past 2 years. Just because we weren't living on it doesn't mean it was abandoned. I showed him the survey map, pointing to the exact boundaries of my property. "Your cottage sits right here," I said, tapping the paper. "Which is right here." I pointed to the land around us. "On my property," He stared at the documents for a long time, and I watched the reality sink in. This wasn't a misunderstanding about property lines. This wasn't a case of disputed ownership or unclear boundaries. He had built a house on someone else's land without permission, without checking, without even considering that maybe, just maybe, he should have asked first. "I had no idea," he stammered. "I thought because it was empty." ... Single quotes, "Empty doesn't mean free, Bob. Empty doesn't mean unclaimed. Empty just means the owner hasn't built on it yet." The silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of wind and those pine trees Grandpa had loved so much. "What do you want me to do?" he asked finally, and for the first time since I'd discovered his cottage. He sounded like a man who understood the gravity of what he'd done. I looked at this beautiful little house he'd built, at the garden he'd carefully tended, at the porch where he'd clearly spent many peaceful mornings. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for him. But sympathy doesn't change property law. "Bob, I want you to remove your cottage from my land. I want you to restore the lot to the condition it was in before you decided to make yourself at home. And I want you to do it quickly, before this becomes a legal matter neither of us wants to deal with." His shoulders sagged. "How long do I have?" 2 weeks. "That seems fair for undoing something you never should have done in the first place." He nodded slowly, still staring at the deed in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I really didn't know it belonged to someone, Bob," I said. "And I meant this. I believe you didn't know. But not knowing doesn't make it right. And being sorry doesn't change the fact that you built a house on my grandfather's land without permission." Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Bob dismantle his cottage piece by piece. It was fascinating and heartbreaking at the same time. Every board he'd carefully nailed in place, every window he'd perfectly leveled, every shingle he'd weatherproofed against the elements, all of it had to come down. I'll give him credit. He worked methodically and carefully. This wasn't angry destruction or sloppy demolition. He treated that cottage with respect, even as he took it apart. And I found myself respecting that about him. On the Wednesday of the first week, he knocked on my front door. "I wanted you to know," he said, hat in hand. "I found a place to relocate the cottage. My brother has a lot across town and he's letting me rebuild there. I'm going to do it right this time. Permits, surveys, the whole thing." I nodded. "That's good, Bob. I'm glad you'll be able to use all your hard work." And I wanted to apologize again. Not just for building on your land, but for acting like it was no big deal when you confronted me. That was wrong of me, you know what? In that moment, I saw a different side of Bob. Not the presumptuous neighbor who'd claimed my land, but a man who'd made a serious mistake and was trying to make it right. "I accept your apology," I told him. "We all make mistakes. The important thing is learning from them." By the end of the second week, my lot looked almost exactly as it had when Grandpa first bought it. The wildflowers were still there, the pine trees still whispered in the breeze, and the clearings where I'd planned to build were clear once again. I walked through that land on a Sunday afternoon. Just me and the memories of my grandfather, and felt a peace I hadn't expected. This wasn't just about winning or being right. It was about honoring Grandpa's gift and protecting something he'd wanted me to have. But the story doesn't end there. Friends, a month later, Bob stopped by again. This time he had something in his hands, a small wooden sign, beautifully carved and stained. "I made this for your lot," he said. I thought maybe you'd like something to mark it as yours. So this never happens again. The sign read Patterson Family Land EST, 2001, with a small carving of pine trees along the bottom. "Bob," I said, genuinely touched, "this is beautiful. It's the least I could do. And I wanted you to know I've been telling everyone about what happened, about how important it is to check property ownership before making assumptions. Maybe my mistake can keep someone else from making the same one." I invited him in for coffee that day, and we talked for 2 hours about property rights, about assumptions, about the importance of research and respect for other people's belongings. It turned out Bob was a retired contractor who'd always dreamed of building a cottage retreat. His intentions were good, but his execution was illegal. The thing is, he told me, I was so excited about the project that I never stopped to think about whether I had the right to be excited about it. I saw beautiful unused land and assumed that meant available land. 6 months later, my lot looks completely different. But this time, the changes are mine. I've built a small gazebo where Grandpa's favorite clearing used to be. I've planted a vegetable garden that's already producing more tomatoes than I know what to do with. And yes, I've put up Bob's sign, along with some very clear private property markers around the perimeter. But more than that, I've learned to be present in my ownership. I visit the lot every weekend now, sometimes to work on projects, sometimes just to sit in that gazebo and listen to the birds. Grandpa always talked about, the experience taught me that ownership isn't passive. It's not enough to have a deed in a filing cabinet and pay your taxes once a year. If you want to protect what's yours, you have to be involved with it, aware of it, present in your ownership. And Bob? Well, he finished his cottage on his brother's land, and from what I hear, it's even more beautiful than the first one. But this time, he did it right. Permits, surveys, legal ownership, the works. He even started a small business helping other retirees navigate the legal requirements for building projects. Last month, he sent me a photo of his new cottage with a note. Thank you for teaching me the right way to build a dream. That meant more to me than any apology could have. Friends, I want to share some practical lessons from this whole experience, because I think they apply to more than just property disputes. First, documentation is everything. Keep your deeds, your surveys, your tax records. Know exactly what you own and where your boundaries are. Don't assume everyone else knows or respects those boundaries. Second, presence matters. Whether it's property, relationships, or responsibilities, being absent doesn't mean being forgotten. But it can make you vulnerable to people who assume absence means abandonment. Third, approach conflicts with documentation, not just emotion. When I confronted Bob, I came armed with facts, not just anger. That made all the difference in how the conversation went. And finally, people can change. Bob could have remained stubborn and defensive. Instead, he chose to learn from his mistake and make it right. That taught me something about grace and second chances that I won't forget. Today, when I sit in my gazebo and look out over the land Grandpa left me, I think about more than just property rights. I think about legacy, what we leave behind, what we pass on, what we protect for the next generation. Grandpa didn't just leave me a lot of land. He left me a responsibility to care for something beautiful, to stand up for what's right, and to handle conflicts with dignity and determination. The cottage that Bob built without permission is gone. But the lessons from that experience will last a lifetime. Sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in the most challenging packages, and sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply show up and say, "This is mine, and I'm here to take care of it." Have you ever had to stand up for your property rights? Have you learned lessons about ownership the hard way? Share your stories in the comments below. I love hearing from you folks who've navigated these tricky situations. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more real-life tales of neighbors' property and the sometimes messy business of standing up for what's right. And remember, friends, whether it's land, relationships, or dreams, the things worth having are worth protecting. Don't let anyone convince you that unused means unwanted, or that absent means abandoned. Until next time, keep standing up for what's yours. And keep being good neighbors, the kind who ask before they build, and who respect the word no when they hear it. Thanks for listening to my story. I'll see you in the next one.